First of all, I'm Linda Shane. I am the Program and Operations. Oh, that's my old title.
Yeah, that's your title. I'm promoter, and what does she do?
I'm Operations Director.
Yay.
So I just got hired. Yay! Thank you. Oh, gotta change that one. So thank you for coming. We have some panelists today that you're going to learn a tremendous amount of information from, and I'd like to say thank you to them first. We have Kathy Sweeney right here. We have York Kessler right here. We have Kathy Oss. And we have Jesse Hinneker. These will be our experts today. And they are experts for sure. I would also like to say a special thank you to Marathon Petroleum. Without partners and sponsors, such as Marathon Petroleum, we cannot make these classes free and offer these really lovely informational things without these partnerships. We're very thankful for that. And we are also blessed to have a sustainability representative with us from Marathon Petroleum. I'd like Jason to talk with you a little bit about the partnership of us and Marathon. So.
Thanks, Linda. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
As Linda mentioned, my name is Jason Akey. I live just a couple miles north of town here. I'm employed by Marathon Petroleum. I've been at the St. Paul Park Refinery since 2008. And my role is a corporate role where I'm the energy efficiency manager for all 13 of our refineries. So that means my job is to try to save natural gas and electricity consumption at each one of our plants. As you can guess, it takes a lot of energy to boil oil and make motor fuels. And that program has been in place for about 15 years. Really proud of it. We've got 6 of our 13 refineries are Energy Star certified. You're probably familiar with the Energy Star brand, just like your dishwasher or your refrigerator. Well, if you're in a top 25th percentile for energy efficiency, the top quarter, you can become certified. And so having almost half of our refineries in the top quartile kind of speaks to the fact that we really value sustainability aspects and being good stewards of our resources. I'll be around afterwards if you want to hear anything more about that. The plug I'll give you is that you're probably wondering why a petroleum company is sponsoring some sustainability and ESG type stuff. Well, it really is one of our values, and you don't see it here in Minnesota, Wisconsin area yet. But we have assets in North Dakota and California that are now taking beef tallow, distillers corn oil, and soybean oil and making over 1 million gallons a day of renewable diesel out of it. So not using fossil fuels, we're taking plants and other materials that are waste and now converting it. So that's the transition we're in as a company. If you want to learn more about that, let me know and I'll be around afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And also, just to piggyback on that point, Friends of Freedom Park is a nonprofit organization that maintains this facility. We're a nonprofit. So with partners like this, being a nonprofit, again, we're able to offer free classes for you guys. So thank you. We're also thankful to the cable station. So for viewers who would like to tune in at a later time, they can see this program. And you guys can also go back and access this. And when you go home and you're like, I forgot what they said, you can go and watch it on the cable station. So, thank you. And I would suggest you guys come back and enjoy all the programming that we're going to do all the rest of the spring, summer, and fall here at the center. You're always welcome. Thank you. Now I'll leave it to the professionals.
Oh, my wife first now? All right. I'm glad we're all here. What a lovely day we have to come out here. My name is York Kessler, and I'm a certified master naturalist in Wisconsin, and as is my wife, Kathy. And we've been interested in native planting, and probably since 30 years now, since we got we had our master gardener, then we switched over to master naturalist. And it's really been a great joy. I'm also a beekeeper. So as a natural extension of beekeeping, I got involved with figuring out what are all the different plants that are blooming, and see what's going on in the environment. When you're a beekeeper, you need to know what's going on. So it's a natural extension. Today what I want to talk about is what Doug Tallamy, who wrote a book in 2007, that really started the whole movement towards a sort of plant native and why it is important. And his first book was called Bringing Nature Home. And he's written several other books. And his latest one is Nature's Best Hope, which was published just a couple of years ago. And this book really talks about how we can be active in bringing back nature. So we use that as our basis for the steps. There are 10 steps that he recommends that we use for the work that we're doing. The other book that we use a lot is Pollinators of Native Plants by Heather Holm, and she is a Minnesota entomologist who is very deeply involved in looking at native plants, their pollinators, and she has a ton of information also about the different kinds of plants and the kinds of insects that interact with them. So those are the basis for what we're doing here. And I'm gonna do a little introductory video by Doug Talon. It's like 2 minutes, and he kind of explains what the whole thing is all about. So I'm hoping.
The ability for ecosystems to function in our managed landscapes in our suburban-urban matrix is very poor because we have landscape primarily for looks. We've treated plants as if they were decorations and forgotten all about their ecological roles. So we've sacrificed the ability of all of the land that we've used for our suburban neighborhoods to make ecosystem services that not only support other creatures, but they support us as well. And that's one of the reasons that we're doing the research we're doing. We're trying to generate enough data to convince people that these landscapes can be highly productive. If you produce plants that insects cannot reproduce on and develop on, you are creating a really depauperate ecosystem. What this homeowner has done is put the plants back into the suburban landscape. Most of these plants are indigenous. They are native to this area, which means they are important components of the food webs that originally were in this area. So you have lots of wildlife around, and these plants are filtering our water, they're sequestering carbon, they're supporting food webs, they are supporting the pollinators that keep those plants around. They're producing oxygen. All of the ecosystem services that plants provide are now happening right in this yard because it's not one vast lawn. When I think of best plants, I think of what those plants are doing, and in almost every instance, oaks come out on top. In our region of the country, the mid-Atlantic states, oaks support 534 species of caterpillars. And remember, the birds are eating those caterpillars, so that's 534 species of bird food coming from the oak in your front yard. There's no other tree that does it better. Just for comparison's sake, if you had a ginkgo in your shed, it supports one species of caterpillar. So there's a huge difference in the productivity of these particular trees. I care about this because we need these other living things to run the ecosystems that we can as humans. So we can think of this as we're not making a sacrifice here. We're doing what's absolutely necessary to keep ecosystems running that support us. So it's for humans.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, quit now. There we go. So what Doug Talon was talking about there was how important it is that we provide the plants that the insects use to keep the environment healthy. And obviously different plants support different kinds of insects, and different insects support different kinds of plants. We know that there are a lot of specialist plants, relationships that have developed over the years, over millennia, really. And some of those we'll talk about a little bit later. Like an example is the monarch butterfly and milkweed. Those are very specific relationships that they have there. And there are other insects that are very much specialists in certain plants. This is I'm going to talk about lawns and how they are not very good. This is a picture of some Bradford pears in a development, and with a lawn behind it. And if you look at this, this is basically a food desert for birds. There is absolutely no diversity at all in the plants. The Bradford pear doesn't produce much nectar, so it's not even good for, if there were insects there, to provide any nectar. Also, the Bradford pears are not native. They're a weak plant. They tend to break easily in the wind. They're very short-lived. They really don't provide, there's no insect that really uses them, rather than maybe the tiny bit of nectar they have. And if you look at the lawns, there's no diversity there either. I mean, these lawns are are manicured, they're sprayed to keep all the broadleaves out, and the only insect that you really find in those lawns is going to be sod wedworm, and we're going to have to spray that to kill the sod wedworm to keep our lawn looking just exactly pristine. So if a bird were to land here, it would find nothing to eat, and it's certainly nothing to provide its youngsters, its offspring. 96% of birds count on insects to feed their young. Like all young creatures, insects are the only protein source that the birds are going to have to grow. So, and in order to have the insects and the caterpillars that they'll be feeding, we have to have the right plants there. The right plants are not here. Nothing eats Bradford pears because it did not evolve with them. So this is basically a desert. Now, a lot of people think, well, all the nature preserves and the state parks and so on will provide all that nature needs. And in fact, it is not anywhere close to what we need. There are 63 national parks with 52 million acres of land. There are 40 million acres of lawn. If we were to take just half of that lawn, we would increase the natural areas by 40%. So what we're talking about today is taking half of your lawn and putting it back into nature so that the right plants are there, so the right insects that can live there and reproduce, and then provide the diversity and food for the birds and the other animals that need them. Now, there are many different kinds of plants, not native plants, lots of different native plants. And like in many things, not all plants are equal. Some plants provide a lot more to a larger audience. And as Doug Tellamy talked about, oak is the king of the keystone plants. The keystone plants are about 19% of the plants, but they provide about 70% of all of the interactions with the ecosystem. So it's very important that when we are planting, we think of the keystone plants. If we do not have the keystone plants, then those ecosystems will, in fact, fade out after a while. They will not be prosperous. So I'm going to talk about the keystone plants. The biggest keystone plant is the oak. Now, one of the things that we did to find what are the keystone plants for our area is we went to the National Wildlife Federation, and there they have the list of the keystone plants in the eastern forest, which we are on the very western edge of. We are also really here, part on the very eastern edge of the prairie. So in this area right here, we get kind of a mix, and it makes it interesting. If you want to find out what specific plants are native to your particular zip code, you can go to the National Wildlife Federation, enter your zip code, and it will tell you the plants that are common, that are native in your area. So,
let me just add to that. We have a resource handout to give you today. It's got all this stuff in it, just so you know that if you didn't get that written down or whatever, you'll have that to take home with you.
yeah. Now, Doug said he had 534 species out east where he is that use the oak tree. In our area, it's about 389 species that use it. That's what this number here is. It's 389. So planted oak has got the best bang for the buck. We'll go through some of the shrubby ones first, and then we'll move into the forests. Willow. Willow is great because it's one of the first ones to bloom in the spring. And my bees, when they're out there in the spring looking for stuff, I can tell when the willows are blooming because you get that yellow pollen they start bringing in when there's still snow on the ground. So that's really important because it's good for my honeybees. You can imagine what it's like for all those early hatching kinds of bees and other insects that are coming out. So it's really wonderful for that. And it grows well in wet areas, as we know. Chokecherry, blackcherry provide tons of stuff. 377 species have been identified as using this. So this is an excellent plant to have. I really like these flowers that are the racemes that are showing there. I think they're really beautiful. And then of course the berries. We have birch. I think the birch, the bark on the birch has always been very fascinating to me. The way that it peels and it looks, I don't know, really artistic, very interesting. And has these little catkins and the bright yellow leaves in the fall. 358 also grows in the wet areas. And of course, all of the maples and elders, box elders. Now a lot of people think of box elder as a really weedy tree, which it really is, but it is incredibly useful for ecosystems. There's 255 species that live with and use the maples and box elders. And of course, with the sugar maple, you get that beautiful fall color and the thin shade that goes with it. One of the ones that I think I like for hedges is high bush camberry. I think it's a beautiful plant. You can get it quite tall, and it can become moderately dense, so that you can't see through it. So you can use it as a hedge. In the fall, it gets this orange color. It can be orange to purple, just beautiful with those berries. And of course, 553 different species will use those plants. Goldenrod. Now goldenrod, everybody thinks goldenrod is what causes your sneezing, your allergies, and that is not the case. Goldenrod, well, let's talk a little bit about sneezing and allergies. The thing is, the reason that there's allergies is because there's things that float in the air. The pollen, the seed, the spores that float in the air, they get into your nose and they make you cough and sneeze and have the reaction. If a plant, flower, has a color, the reason that it has a color is because it needs to attract an insect to come and take the pollen and move it on to the next plant, to fertilize the next plant. So, and the reason that does that is because the pollen is too heavy to float in the air. So when people are looking at goldenrod, they say, oh, that causes my allergies. And in fact, it is not the goldenrod. But if you look behind the goldenrod, there is a totally green plant that is ragweed that blooms at the same time. And that is a wind-borne spore. So when the wind blows, the yellow goldenrod will wave in the wind, but behind that there will be trillions of spores that are being picked up by the wind and scattered throughout the environment, including, of course, where you are and breathing it in. But it is extremely useful. And it's relatively easy to maintain too. Some people have said it spreads a lot. I found we have a big bunch of it in our backyard, and I mowed it a few times, and it doesn't come back very quickly. Meadowsweet, beautiful. It's really, it likes wet areas, and it has this beautiful, fluffy-looking flower. 85. Joe Pyeweed, one of my favorites for wetter areas, gets to be 7 feet tall, very colorful, very showy plant. Baptisia, beautiful blues, and there's also white versions of that as well. And they make a nice clump, a very structural looking thing, and the leaves are very distinct. So they make nice mounds with these colors blowing up over them. And of course, one of the first things in the spring are geraniums. I see them all over, and they just delight me in the spring when I start to see them come out, along with the bloodroot and anemones. Brown-eyed Susan, sort of a late summer. A lot of plants, a lot of insects use those, and they also add color in the fall. In the fall, one of the things that I found is that if you think about when plants bloom and when they grow, you'll find in the spring the plants are small, lower the ground, 6 inches, just popping right out, getting up before the leaves tree out. Then as it gets later in the year, in the late spring, they get a little taller. And as the summer goes on, they get taller, and then eventually you get to the point where you get like the Joe Pyeweed gets to be 6, 7 feet tall, because they're shading out everything else underneath it. So those little plants have to get up right away. So you can get this nice gradation of different colors and also these different heights. Milkweeds, famous of course for our butterflies, for the monarchs. There's lots. If you think about it, what happened with the monarchs is they were having a crisis, and people really like the monarch. It's a beautiful butterfly. And so people have got behind it and said, we've got to save the monarchs. And like, we have to save the bees. And that is really great because it really creates an awareness of the environment and what is going on. And what Doug Tallamy and others are doing is saying, okay, let's not just do it for specific species. What we want to do is we want to do that same thing, save as many and have as diverse a population as we can, to save many more of the crucial insects. Because the insects are really the workhorses of nature. They're the largest producer of animal protein of any creature. They eat a plant, and it ends up as animal protein. So they're taking the plants take the sunshine, turn it into plant matter. The plant matter is eaten by the insects, which turns into animal protein, which then the birds eat and gets into the environment. So they're really important. They also break down all kinds of things. Everything that dies is eaten by an insect or a mold or a fungus. So they're one of the big decomposers. Otherwise, we'd have dead things all over the place just lying around. Monarda, beautiful. The bees, all the insects love this. And it blooms for a long time. So it's very colorful. Now there are different cultivars, and maybe you're going to talk about cultivars a little bit. But the cultivars, you have to be a little bit careful. When you do a cultivar, it's breeding for a particular thing. So like with roses, we're looking for a particular kind of long stem rose, and if you smell those roses, there's no smell to them anymore. The fragrance is gone because they want to, and the same thing can happen with the cultivars. If you're looking for a particular color, like we want a purple one or a deep maroon or something, then you may lose some of the other characteristics. So we've got to be careful when you're planting native that you avoid the cultivars. Laetris, one of my favorites. It's a tall plant, very showy. Butterflies love this. They're always all over these. Now, one of the other things, and I know you'll be talking about it, is you don't just plant two. Plant a clump. Insects are attracted to clumps of plants rather than just one or two, because it's much more, they like it much better. I mean, it's less work for them. I mean, if I go to a place where there's 100 plants as opposed to where there's 3, I'm going to go with 100 plants because it's just a lot more productive for me, less energy for me. And the other thing that, well, we talked about this already, is if you want to attract particular insects, like the monarch butterfly, then you've got to plant the plants that they are attracted to. And there are, for example, if you want to ever get Connor butterflies, which is now a rare species here in Wisconsin, you have to plant wild lupin. It's the only place where they live. That's the only thing that they will reproduce on. So there's that to consider when you're planting as well. And these also, there's certain birds, certain plants that birds like, certain trees, certain plants, and you can find out if you want to attract certain birds. You can go to the Audubon Society pages and get information there about if you want cardinals or if you want chickadees or if you want certain other things. There are places that tell you which plants to plant in order to attract those as well. So, and then Kathy will do the resources at the end after Alice is done. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm Kathy Oss. I live in Prescott, and I've been a volunteer up in these park gardens since they were installed in 2008. So our park gardens are 17 years old now. Wow. And I'm going to talk, a lot of what George just talked about is similar to what I'm going to cover, because I was just wanting to tell people that if you want to learn about these keystone plants, a good place to come is Freedom Park. So you can just see this happening. Drive this thing. So this is a short talk just about what we're doing at the park here and how it relates to what Doug Tallamy is, what his message is. And I did see Doug Tallamy speak in 2010. It was right after his first book was released, Bringing Nature Home. I was at a Minnesota Nursery and Landscape Convention for professionals in Minneapolis, and that's a field I worked in for the last 20 years. So we were all excited to hear what he had to say. We'd heard about him, and it was a sellout crowd. And he got on stage, and he was really crabby. And the reason was he was in a walking cast, and he had flown in the night before, and it had been this huge winter storm, ice, just like what we had this week, and he slipped. And so he spent the night in the ER, and then he had to go fly back to Delaware to get some orthopedic surgery. So we gave him a big Minnesota welcome, I guess. But once he started talking and gave his speech, he just got a standing ovation, because this is just such a new idea of actually observing plants and the interactions with insects. So this is why I call this plants with purpose. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, great.
All right, so this is a little bit about the gardens at Freedom Park, and there's a strong emphasis, as you can read, to plants that are native to Wisconsin and particular to this setting. That went into the plant selection up at the park. The main beds were installed in 2006, and we've got different gardens up here that went in over the following years. We added a butterfly garden, and our last planting was just this fall. It's a goat prairie project that went in. So this is our sunny gardens, now mature. Got plants for shade. We have a rain garden, a rainwater garden off the parking lot, and a lot of people don't even really see it because it's kind of in the corner. So I love it when we get the rain garden cleaned out in the spring, and then the first big gully washer, I like to race up to the park and see the water. And it all disappears within 24 hours. It takes the runoff from the parking lot and helps filter out any pollution from the vehicles that are parked in our parking lot. Keeps it from going down into the groundwater. This is our butterfly garden. This is the garden that everybody really likes. These are not native plants right here. These are zinnias, but we do have quite a few native plants in here. And I'll just let you look at that for a minute. Planted and they will come. Yeah, that was last summer when I was up here. It just kind of, this butterfly just, and it was right in front of this cute little garden stake I got from pollinatorfriendly.org, which I'm a member of. Sorry, I'm trying to learn how to drive this mouse here.
It's good to watch. Nice.
Our butterfly garden is also a certified Monarch Way station. So that's a wonderful designation for us to have at the park. This is our last garden that just went in last fall. Our director, Israel Haas, was instrumental in getting all the funding for this, and we planted over 600 native plant plugs in September. So we've got some pasque flowers that should be blooming first, and this will be a fun garden to watch grow. So we got lots going on at the park. So getting back to Professor Ptolemy and the largest conservation effort in years that they're trying to do is to reach out and get homeowners to plant little parts of this in their yards. So we're increase the habitat with these keystone native plants. And why are they essential? Well, it turns out that most of the birds that we really like, they feed their nestling caterpillars. So what we are trying to do in our gardens, in addition to everything else we are trying to do as gardeners by having beauty and the right plants in the right places, now we should think about growing food for birds. Birds do not feed their baby birds bird seed. A couple species do, like finches and mourning doves. They can chew up the seeds and regurgitate them for the babies, but all the other birds that we love depend on finding these caterpillars for their baby birds. I've heard them described as hot dogs for the baby birds. They're soft and squishy, and they can put them in the baby's mouth. And I love this picture. I got that's from the National Wild Foundation. That's a kestrel pushing up. What is that, like a hornworm? I'm not very good at entomology, but I think that's a hornworm caterpillar. I wouldn't want to eat that, but that baby bird does.
That's it.
So here we are with our keystone plants, and our bur oak up at the park is the star. And we are so lucky to have this beautiful grove of pre-settlement oaks that are growing. They're very old. So we've got quite a few of them, and then we probably have some of their children from acorns that are growing around here. So that's, we have covered all the species numbers. I did put them in there. And I love this. This was a post in our Facebook group called Stewards of Freedom Park, which I'd like you to all go and join, because it's going to be our main way of communicating to people that are interested about the gardens. And we're going to offer volunteer opportunities. We're going to try to get more educational information on there. And I probably will post some plant lists from this presentation, so you don't have to worry about writing it down. But this is a caption that, this is a photo by Emily Betzler. She used to work up here, and she wrote this, the kind of day in Wisconsin that we all live for. So look at that beautiful canopy. And that's what's so fun about working up at the park too, or just being up at the park on days like this. It's just people up at the park enjoying this beautiful lawn we have out here that is in a good proportion to the plantings. And this is a park, by the way. Native plants are tough. So the great thing about these plants is, you know, we've had the errant child and dog and balls thrown through our plantings, and they've all survived. They will come up year after year. You're not going to kill, kids are not going to kill our gardens. The willow. I just read a post in the Minnesota State Horticulture Society posted that willow is the new oak for most home gardeners in Minnesota. So some of these plants like oak, you can't really fit in your home garden, nor should you try, because they're going to get so big. But we do have a willow in our gardens up at in the butterfly garden, and it's really fun when it blooms, because it's, I mean, this has bloomed through the snow. And I didn't really capture it, but when these little flowers come out, there's all these little tiny bees come out of nowhere, and I don't even know what they're called. It's just fun to watch. So
Brown bees.
it's one of the bees. They're little tiny green and brown and sweat bees.
Can I just add something?
Yes.
Heather Holm, and we were talking about her earlier, but she's a Minnesota entomologist. She's got some great books on all the native bees of Wisconsin and Minnesota. So we can use those to identify who these little creatures are that we're talking about. And we'll want to make sure that you know where you can get one of her books, because they're about this big. You can carry them in your, in your backpack. So when you see these guys, you can identify them.
Yeah, and the thing about these pictures I'm showing, it's interesting, is what you showed. We're like, we didn't talk to each other about our presentations. This is just information that we've gotten from these National Wildlife Federation lists. And we're concurring on everything we're talking about here, so.
Just as an aside, I have a particular interest in entomology, being beekeeper, of course. And I did not know this. I always knew there was native bees. In Wisconsin, we have 427 species of native bees.
Wow.
That's way beyond anything that we ever see, because most of them are single moms. They hatch, they mate, they lay their eggs in a little, either in the mud or in a tunnel or somewhere in a beetle hole in a tree, and then they die. And you never see them because They're tiny, they're solitary, and they're not like the big bumblebees or the honeybees that you see that come around all over. So most of them, 420 of them, you'll probably never see, except around when the willows come up.
Yeah, it's just amazing. It's not what we know, it's what we don't know. And that's why this habitat is so important. And I'm so glad that, you know, we kind of just were able to plant some of these things up at the park. Now, this is a great small species to add to your home garden or smaller landscape. This is the Amelanchier family, the serviceberries. We have 2 types of serviceberry in our park plantings up here, and it has a good number of species that it supports. This is a fun one, the buttonbush, and that gets a certain kind of specific bee that I've never seen on any of the other plants. So I don't have a picture right here, but that's in our butterfly garden. It's hard to find small-sized woody native plants. So now we're going to move on to herbaceous, and the goldenrod family is just I guess you better include a goldenrod if you're going to do a small planting. So I like this one, the stiff leaf goldenrod. We've actually pulled out the Canada goldenrod, a lot of it out of our main gardens. We did that the last 2 seasons because it got too aggressive. But we're letting these go. And then the showy goldenrod is that's in the butterfly garden. So here you go. This is July. I mean, you could just stand there all day. It's better than looking at your phone or television or anything. It's just a show. So that's that. Oops, I'm sorry. I don't know what I'm doing wrong here with this. Okay, the aster family, they're the other stars of keystone plants, and they don't offer so much in the spring as far as producing caterpillars, but they're important food in the fall at the end of the season for the adult butterflies. It's pollen food and also for bees. So we've got 4 different types of aster up at the park. The white heath asters, the New England aster, which is the most beautiful, and it's just another show you can watch. You can just come up here and stare at the plants and be happy. That's how I feel when I look at this. Yeah, and this was in October, believe it or not. Yeah, it was really late. So it's important to have, as you have mentioned, to have plants from spring to the end of the season. That's why asters really rank up there. I'm going to get fired from this presentation here. Okay, the Rudbeckia family. It's another amazing number of species. Now I didn't include everything. I did not include, I could show you hundreds of other plants that we have growing up here, but I just stuck to the list of which are the ones that, the keystone plants. New Jersey tea. I'd like to grow more of this up here. So pretty. Mentioned the Joe Pye weed already. People might be pretty familiar with that plant. That's okay. The milkweeds. We'll go. We've got about 3 different milkweeds in our gardens up here. The orange and the swamp milkweed, which is kind of my favorite. I like this one. And that's just what you get when you plant milkweeds. You'll be out there one day and you'll look up and there'll be little caterpillars all over your milkweeds. And believe it or not, a lot of birds do eat these caterpillars. I was reading, like, they've adapted to the milkweed gives a poison protection to these caterpillars. But the birds, they can a lot of them eat them. We have white baptisia, the wild baptisia in the gardens up here, but all the baptisias are good. This is lead plant. It's a legume. So it's so beneficial in so many ways. And this one goes way back in the history of the prairies. And you'll see this plant in a lot of prairie restorations. I would really like to get more of this going up here. And I know we planted a lot of it in the goat prairie, the new goat prairie. We've got quite a few lead plants. So you can. And another thing about this goat prairie is that we put this in last fall, and a lot of the bank restoration that's gone on up here at the park has been getting rid of these huge invasive trees that were obscuring the views. I mean, people couldn't even see the rivers. So when we planted this last part, it'll be nice because these plants, which we're hoping some of them will grow on the bank, but they'll be right up here because we can't let people go down the bank to look at them because it's actually dangerous. It's so steep. So it will be a good chance for you to be up close to these plants. So there's 3 types of plants out there, says Doug Tallamy. Contributors, non-contributors, and detractors. Detractors would be your invasive plants. Here's a good example of contributors. Here's some lupins that we grew up here. This is the wild lupin that supports the Karner blue. And I got these seeds from a dear person that I worked in her gardens in Oak Grove for many years. And she let me take the seeds and some of the seedlings, and I just brought them up to the park. So I'd like to get more of this going. This is one of those bees that we're supposed to be protecting. I sent this into the bee, it's called bee, where you can send pictures of bees and they tell you what these are. And this is one of the endangered bees. I forgot what I'm sorry, I'm a really bad entomologist. I don't know the names of the insects. Okay, so I don't want to break your hearts, but not to be confused with the big leaf lupins that are up along the North Shore that everybody loves and photographs, and they come in pinks and whites, and they're actually different in their flower structure. It's kind of hard to tell the difference, but these are actually invasive plants, and in a lot of the state parks, they are removing these. So it's hard to make the right choice. You're going to have to really investigate what you're buying. There's the bee balms. We have a lot of these up here at the park. I love wild geranium in the spring. It's so pretty with this plant. So these are two plants that are really great for shade gardens. They work well together. Wild columbines come in. And I'm going to finish up with showing a few. This is the Liatris family. We have these up. This is from the park, and this is true. These are truly butterfly magnets. And so this is not the park. This is my house, my own little garden. And I just want to finish up the plant part of this by telling you that, you know, I'm hoping that you'll get inspired to try some of these plants in your own backyard, because it's just nonstop entertainment. Once you get these going, you can just sit on your deck with a beverage, and you can watch these. It's a hot day, and you just go sit out there, and you invite your grandkids over and your neighbors, and you get the kids involved, and everyone loves to come and see these. And they're just two plants I've had for years, but they've gotten really big, and
You look so happy.
I mean, look at all those monarchs on there.
Oh, that's awesome.
I bought those, they're the same Liatris we have in the park, and I bought them from Kinnickinnick Natives when we had a plant sale up here one year, and they're getting bigger and bigger and starting to kind of seed around, which I like. So, yeah, so that's a fun thing to think about, that you could add this habitat in your yard and have this. Okay, so this is the most important part of my talk.
Okay.
Because we need people to help with the garden. So please be a park steward. And all that means is you're just going to support us up here in what we do. It might mean that you want to work up here a little bit with us in some of our projects. It might mean that you don't want to work or not able to work, but you love nature and you just want to support our efforts. It might mean that you might want to donate some money. we may have some specific projects that we might be asking for some funding for, because we need to renovate 2 of our beds this spring. So consider being this park steward, or being part of our park steward group. We have an upcoming event, Earth Day cleanup, Linda, right?
The garden cleanup, Earth
Yep.
Day?
And that's April 16th. This is Saturday, so we're still working on that. But we're going to be posting all of our announcements and information on our Freedom Park Facebook page, on our Park Steward group page on Facebook. We also have an Instagram, and we have email lists. So there's a lot of ways we can reach out to you, and the only thing we're kind of not doing is a lot of print. So I hope everybody can kind of join one of these ways and look for our announcements. This is our cleanup last year, and spring is a great time for doing all this work up here. We don't really clean out the gardens in the fall anymore. We leave it over winter to protect the habitat and just really go at it in the spring. You can get these beds really cleaned up. You can see the weed trees and dig them out. You can take care of a lot of things. We just make a big giant pile. And then the city of Prescott helps us out a lot. They come up here and take it all away for us. So that's coming up. And I guess that's it. I just want to say thank you for listening to me.
Quick question. How bad is a buckthorn in the park?
The buckthorn, the worst part of the buckthorn has been on this bank, and that's what so many people have worked on this.
Yeah. Good.
So when it first, I think around 2010 or so, we had a group of people up here that were actually rappelling down the bank and cutting down all this stuff.
Oh, geez.
It's so hard because it's a very steep bank. So then Israel Haas, the last director, he spearheaded this, working with this group called Great River Greening. They do a lot of work in the Mississippi River Gorge all the way up into the Twin Cities. They have these great teams of people that can advise you in removal and replanting. So it's been really good to have them helping us out with this planning, and that's where the goats came from. And the goats were very popular. Everyone loves the goats. In fact, people still are coming up asking where the goats are. But we don't always have goats tethered out there constantly, because goats will eat everything. So goats are just a controlled thing. It costs a lot of money to have goats. The goat herder brings them in, and it's, lets them graze in a certain area, moves them down with fencing. And the goats, we hope to have the goats back at another time, but we're being advised by Great River Greening right now when that is. So we already got the land cleared, and we got the goat prairie planted. So.
Thank you.
Sure, thanks. Let me just interject very quickly in regards to the stewards of Freedom Park. I have a sign-up sheet. So if you're interested, please sign up. We'd love to have you come for that. Now, just for the sake of time, we're running short, but and I understand if you need to leave at 2 o'clock, please go. But we do have this piece of the presentation, so you are welcome to stay and finish out the whole entire presentation and get seeds. So just kind of wanted to make you aware. So it's up to you.
All right. Yes, I'll speak fast. Mine isn't very big, long.
Oh, yeah.
I don't have a fancy PowerPoint, but I do have a handout that I think Linda passed out, so you guys can follow along there. Again, my name is Jessie Hinnicker. I am not a native here. I did go to school in River Falls, so I do have a horticulture degree. I have lots of experience in I even worked at a flower shop once, several summers. I worked at a nursery, so I know the growing and nurturing and starting plants. I interned for Bailey Nurseries out in their West Coast division in Oregon, so I spent a summer out there. A lot of different things than what we have here, but similar aspects that we can, apply here. I also was an estate gardener for almost 9 years in southern Minnesota, so I have a lot of experience in installation, design, maintaining all of our plants. So what I'm going to talk to you guys about today is how do we take this concept and actually do it? You know, us as homeowners, how can we, you know, follow this concept of ductality and actually, you know, put it to use. You know, it's great to see plants and everything, but it's kind of overwhelming. Like, oh my gosh, it's so pretty. What do I do? How do I get started? So that's what I'm going to kind of talk about today. I also had the great privilege to, I believe it was the same convention as Kathy, to hear Doug Tallamy speak, and very motivational, you know, very inspiring, huge wealth of knowledge there. So it's great to be able to, you know, read his books and, you know, follow suit in planting things and being able to spread the word. So thanks for listening to me today. So hopefully you guys can go home with some, you know, good useful tools that you can actually get to work on planting these natives. First of all, we'll start with site selection. So you kind of have to figure out, I mean, if you live in town, I'm sure you have a small, you know, lot, but anyone can do this, even if you have an apartment and you just have a couple of patio pots. So you can start planting some of these natives in containers. Even if it's just a small one, you know, can start somewhere. If you don't have anything and would love to get your hands dirty, come be a park steward. So, I mean, we've got lots of them here that can be helpful, and just spreading the word is a huge thing. So whether you have an area for a larger perennial garden, maybe you have acreage, maybe you want to do, you know, several acres of this. So kind of start somewhere, figure out what you want to do, and obviously I would suggest starting small and grow. Do what you can in a year's, you know, time, like be able to manage it. Your site, figure out whether, you know, it's sunny or shady. This is going to help dictate what plants are going to succeed for you, and Kathy's going to talk about our resources and stuff too. So if there's, you know, specific plants that you liked, make sure you have the site that is appropriate for it as well. So soil type, figure out, is it, you know, a heavy clay soil, is it rocky, or if it's in a container garden, it's most likely going to be potting soil. So most of our natives are pretty tough and hardy. And I would say the water source that I have on here too is just make sure that you get them established. You know, give them the best chance that they can. Don't just plant and ignore them and expect everything to grow. Although most of them will probably be successful. But, you know, start small and grow from there. And maybe you team up with some other neighbors in your neighborhood and each plant a different variety or something. And, you know, like you already had talked about, plant a mass, plant a clump, you know, not do one plant each of, you know, 20 varieties, you know, maybe pick like 3 to 4 to start with and do multiple ones of that, so that, you know, you give them a chance to get established. You have a good food source for those insects that are feeding on there, and it is less work for them to be moving around and finding a good source of food. The next step I would say is your site preparation. So once you picked your spot, if you need to, we have the U of M, the UW system, there's lots of different places you can send off soil samples if you need, to figure out, you know, if they're nutrient deficient in something. That way it will also tell you what your soil type is, so then you can target specific plants for that will be most successful in that. Also, like what we did here in the goat prairie garden, there's multiple ways of removing what you already have for existing plant material. Here it was turf. We just removed it with a sod cutter. There's, you know, multiple different ways you can do that. So you can do it by hand. You can cover it with plastic or something to kill it off too. It depends on when you're going to tackle this project and what resources you have for that. And what we did is we removed this, the turf, and then we allowed like a good 2-3 week window for the existing weed seeds that were in there to flush out, because trust me, there's millions of seeds in there that are gonna, as soon as they get, you know, 5 minutes of sunlight, they're gonna start growing. So you need to allow for that, and then you need to remove that growth. You can do that by hand, you know, tilling. We also did, Great River Greening came in and they lightly tilled that spot, and they did put down some ground cover natives, and then we planted through with all of our plugs and perennials. So there's multiple different ways of doing this. If you already have an existing bed, that doesn't need all of that preparation, then maybe it's just removal of non-natives, or you can start interplanting your native plants with your existing beds as well. So I know there's a lot of non-natives out there that are beautiful, and like we said, like the butterfly garden has a lot of annuals and things. There's no harm in interplanting things, so it's always good just to get started, find the ones that you like, you know, that are going to be successful for your garden, and start there. Now when it comes to garden design, again, think about your site. You know, if it's containers, maybe just start, if you have small containers, start with a monoculture. You know, don't worry about trying to pack in, you know, a ton of different plants in a small container, and do, you know, a little bit larger variety for some larger pots, or you can group multiple ones together. So there's lots of different ways you can do that, but also try to include the blooming ones for those insects, to have a food source for the insects and everything that are feeding on them, as well as the grasses. You can mix in with the annual blooms, as I had stated earlier, if you want some color. I know a lot of people are like, well, I don't want just, you know, green grasses, or, you know, things that maybe the first couple of years they aren't established enough to bloom yet. So then go ahead and throw in some color with it as well. So I have on here pollinator-friendly plants. You know, pick those when possible. And typically when I do like container gardens, I usually go with a thriller, spiller, and a filler, if you've ever heard that, you know, so something tall for your thriller. Your filler is going to be more roundy-moundy, and then your spiller is what's going to be like trailing over. And there's lots of different, you know, natives, and again, you know, mix and match with what you know, currently get, you know, for your annuals, if you need to. But perennial beds, vary your height, your growth pattern if you can. I have on here, you know, use less number of plants when you have a very vigorous spreading plant. We have a lot of natives that spread by seed, and they will do all the work for you. You know, you just plant a few of them and they will go to town. Some of them are more rhizomatous. They will spread, you know, with rhizomes under the soil. Some of the other ones are smaller, or they take a little bit longer to get established or to spread and multiply. So in your research, when you're selecting your plants, you know, figure out which ones are more aggressive and use less of them, and use more of the less aggressive plants. So I don't want to scare you and intimidate you of not wanting to plant any natives, but it's the same with, you know, non-native species as well. So mimic the design in native prairie, so a mixture of plants throughout the perennial bed. You can do large swaths of colors, or, you know, mass plantings to create drifts for a little bit more tidier look, depending on what you're going for, if it's at your house or, you know, somewhere else. Plant selection, you can, you know, do all that yourself, or you can pay somebody to do that, you know. So Great River Greening, you know, is a good source. I think you've got more resources too, that if you're like, I have no idea, I know what something blooming, I want purple, whatever, but I don't want to do all the research. There's people that know all that information and would be happy to do that for you. So let's see, maintenance on here. Think about your water source, and most of this is just for the installation and getting it to be established. Think about removal of new weeds that are going to pop up. If you are going to remove a huge area and start, you are going to get, you know, weed seeds that blow in, that birds will be depositing, other animals, and, you know, you'll still want to kind of try to take care of them. So sometimes a light mulch, you know, for the first few years is helpful. Removal of aggressive prairie seedlings in some smaller areas too. Again, if you have a smaller area, be smart about what you're going to plant, so it's not an overly aggressive plant that you get discouraged and you know, you plant 10 of them in there and all of a sudden they take over the area. So just kind of researching what plants you're going to use so that you have the most success. And one thing I would say, gardens are always ever evolving. I mean, the gardens here when, you know, they were first installed, I'm sure look completely different than what, you know, they do now. And just know that that's okay. I mean, nature is ever evolving, and, you know, plants tend to move and they don't always stay in one place. So just know that that's okay. You can always plant something new, or it wasn't as successful as you would like it to be, then try something else, and maybe in a different area too. So let's see. You can always do spring burns. I know we had an early one last year on the hillside here. Otherwise, you can always cut back the plant material. Again, we kind of advise to leave the material there over the winter to help protect everything. The containers, you can either treat those as annuals, or you can protect them for the winter, move your pots in, or plant them out in a garden. All right, so I just kind of wanted to cover Doug Tallamy's approach of this whole idea that we have been talking about today, and kind of the 4 quick, easy takeaways is, to shrink your lawn. You already talked about this. What are we supporting? If you want more wildlife, whether that's birds or insects, and those kinds of things, we need to shrink our lawn and be more careful about what we are planting. And the second is to plant the natives. Third is to feed our pollinators. And then fourth is to remove those invasive species that we have. So, do you guys have any questions? Yeah.
Would you consider a milkweed variety if you had an aggressive plant that would spread more, or
Just the common milkweed?
the common milkweed? I'm looking at putting a garden together of that, maybe with lupines and native. And I want to make sure that I'm battling it out.
Right. I wouldn't call it invasive. It does spread by seed, but those are things too that they're easily identifiable. So that helps to be able to clean up any others. I have some that do come into my lawn, and so I just either mow over those or easily pluck them out. Or they're a little bit harder to transplant because they are a taproot, but I have done it with success. So I guess.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, Kathy, do you want to
Sure.
come talk
Thank
about
you so much. Such great information today. I know that we're over our time, but and I think that you all got a resource handout, right? Handed to you when you came in. It's like, okay. So I'll take a few minutes just to give you some highlights from that, because I know you can read through it, and Linda's got a copy of it, and after today's session we'll update, because there were some things that were added today, so I think Linda's got your email addresses, so she can email that out to you after today, I think. Okay. Okay, so a couple things to say then. First of all, kudos to this community for creating Freedom Park and this learning center, because my husband and I just moved out here 4 years ago, and as York said, we're master naturalists. This is kind of our area of interest, native plants, Doug Tallamy's work, that kind of thing. And this is the only place we know of anywhere near here at all that's got a native garden. And yours is 15 years old, which is really old as these things go, because as we were talking about earlier, Doug Tallamy and all the things he's really brought to our awareness are really pretty new. So for you to have something like this in the community that's had this long to mature and to develop and been cared for 15 years, I give you a lot of credit for that. There's a couple of places for you nearby where you're close enough to these locations where the native plants that are grown there are good here in this area. And that would be Prairie Moon Nursery in Winona, Minnesota, which has a very, very fine reputation for growing native seeds and plants. And their website is just nothing short of spectacular. And on it, they have got all the native seeds that they grow. They tell you exactly how to support those seeds successfully, what kind of soil they need, what kind of shade they need, how to really help them thrive. And so when you're trying to get good information about how to support your native plants, you can look at the Winona Prairie Moon Nursery site and be very sure that you're getting good, reliable information and very good plants. There's another nature center in not too far from here, near Eau Claire, called the Beaver Creek Nature Center. They have a native plant sale. You can order those plants on April 6th. If you go on their website and look at what they have available, they're going to take your order on April 6th, and then you pick them up, I think, early in May. They also have a butterfly house there. In the butterfly house, of course, is like designed to do what we've been looking at today. Give you an idea of what you would have inside of a, in their case, it's a little dome. What would you plant in there if you wanted to support the butterflies around you? And because, again, Eau Claire is close enough, what you see there would work here as well. I would also say one more highlight, and this is in your resource area. When you're trying to identify what you're seeing for plants or insects, if you want to download a free app to put on your phone, look at downloading iNaturalist. And this is supported by the National Geographic Society, so it's a very reputable scientific organization. And what you can do is take a photo. If you want to, you can download it, and then you'll be able to look at not only what you put in there, but also what other people put in there in this area, because the information is in there by zip code. So you can really help each other to learn more about what's going on in the natural sciences community. And other than that, those are the ones I wanted to also mention. Outback Nursery in Hastings. I understand that they're a really good, reliable source of native plants, and I heard that from our folks here from the area, so I believe it. I'm sure it's true. And if there are other places we just didn't know about that we need to add to this, we'd be happy to do that. So anyway, thank you so much. We're all going to be here for a while, and we want to thank you for coming, and we're happy to answer any questions.
I have some extra resource guides. If you'd like to take a copy for a friend or neighbor or anyone that would like one of these, I have them up here. And there are some books up here that are put here for your reference as well, so you can take a look at those. We have our Stewards of Freedom Park sign up, because we'd love to have you here. That's here. And then we have a little takeaway. We have Seven Sisters Greenhouse that's up on Highway 29, donated some seeds for you guys. These are purple echinacea, some peat pots, and we have a wildflower mix.
Wow.
So feel free to take these. These are for you.
Really nice.
So I'd like to say thank you again to all of our presenters today, to our sponsor, to Cable, and to you guys especially for coming. Thank you very much.